Hey gang, it's your buddy Platt here with another video in our Spirit series. Today we're going to focus in on wheat whiskey. The simple definition for wheat whiskey is a whiskey produced with a grain bill of at least 51% wheat. Like the other whiskeys we talked about recently, the rest of the specs for wheat whiskey kind of fall in line with bourbon and rye. It cannot be distilled at higher than 160%. Has to be aged in a new charred oak barrel, has to go in that barrel at no higher than 125 proof, and cannot go in the bottle at less than 80 proof. Again, similar to the other two, except wheat now is the predominant grain in it. There is not a lot of history here in the U.S. or even the rest of the world, for that matter, with wheated whiskeys. It's not one of the most popular styles. It wasn't 50, 100 years ago. This is something that's kind of newer to the market. Wheat in general has been more thought of as a grain for the production of vodka. It has been used though in the past as a secondary grain in bourbon production, corn being the predominant one, and then they usually allow you to throw in either some rye, some barley, some corn, or some mixture of the three, not corn, wheat, barley, rye as the secondary grains to corn. Wheat usually in the past has been the least popular of the three. Traditional bourbons would have usually higher rye and then some barley in there. Recently, I say recently, there are some manufacturers out there that do have a higher wheat bourbon. That's kind of where wheat got a little traction. To name a couple of brands, Maker's Mark, Pappy Van Winkle, W.O. Weller, they are using a higher portion of wheat in their grain bill than the traditional bourbon makers, and that kind of helps differentiate their product. Particularly the story of Maker's Mark is interesting, is that the founders, when creating Maker's Mark, decided to actually go in the kitchen and do a little research, and they took those grains to create bread, and they thought, well, bread using those grains is a good representation of what we're going to get out of our bourbon, and that they enjoyed wheat bread, found it more approachable. Rye, if you ever had rye bread, rye tends to have a little bite, a little spice to it. Wheat bread just tends to be softer. They thought that would be a good quality to put in their bourbon, so they add a little more wheat into their grain bill. I thought that was a unique approach to the idea, using bread, to replicate bourbon. But anyway, that's what they did. And people, again, kind of like, everybody's a little different. People kind of like those bourbons because they seem a little more approachable. Well, so the next logical step would be, well, all right, why don't we make a predominantly wheat-based whiskey? And that's what's starting to be produced now. Most of your wheat whiskeys that are out now have been around less than 10 years. Some of them maybe 15 at the most. Here in the U.S., the wheat whiskeys are just starting to gain some traction. You don't see a lot of them outside the U.S., even though I hear, just a little research, that Germany does have a burgeoning whiskey industry and that they're playing around with wheat whiskeys. The particular wheat whiskey we're going to try today is Bernheim Original Kentucky Straight Wheat Whiskey. 90 proof or 45% alcohol by volume. This is aged 7 years and produced in small batches. We know from the label when it says Kentucky Straight Wheat Whiskey, it's coming from Kentucky. If it says straight, it's aged at least 2 years. This is 7 years. This is produced at the Heaven Hill Distillery, one of the classic distilleries here in Kentucky. It's a wheat whiskey, but this is not 100% wheat whiskey. They do have some corn and barley in the mix, so you're going to get, some of the corn sweetness and maybe, a little bit of the barley notes on there. Bernheim was the first major wheat whiskey brand in the U.S. and it probably still the highest selling one today. Let's give her a try. The nose is real mellow, even though it's 90 proof. I don't kind of get that hot smell that you'd get off higher alcohol whiskeys. We got a nice color there. Let's give it a try. That's nice. That's nice. Do get a little warming from the 90 proof. Little, not much, but hair sweetness up front. Hits the sides of the tongue a little bit. Do get just a touch of caramel, vanilla. Again, that's more necessarily from the barrel than the wheat itself. That's just nice, clean, approachable whiskey. Didn't kick too hard, even at 90 proof. Yeah, nice. I guess it's simpler, it's subtler, and again, that's kind of what they were looking for in wheat whiskeys. This might be something you introduce people to before you get to a classic higher rye bourbon or something, before you get them to try Wild Turkey 101 or something like that. Well, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe down below. Also, please like the video because it lets YouTube know we're putting out good content. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them in the comment section, or you can always contact me on the Twitter page. Till next time, bottoms up.